So today I'm here to interview David Godfrey. David is a mindset and body transformation specialist with over 15 years of coaching experience. He's the author of Think Straight to Lose Weight, and he runs a coaching business, Chase Life, focusing on emotional and behavior change. He's quite prolific with his online Instagram content. He offers great insights, ideas, and solutions. I think the content that he shares, I feel, often gets overlooked by a lot of people and a lot of coaches, especially the listeners of this podcast, I think would attest that people overlook the areas that David works in. And so I think everyone needs to hear a little bit more from David. So welcome, David, to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So, but before we get into the nitty-gritty of specifics on what you do, can you just give us a brief snapshot of your career and I guess what it is you do now?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm so glad we kind of got up and running with good time this morning. Things were pretty hectic this morning, and for those of you who don't know, we've got a 14-month boy, and unfortunately, at the moment, Rachel's got a really bad bug, so she's like horrendously sick.
Yeah.
And just all hell broke loose this morning. I wasn't even sure that I was going to be ready on time for this podcast because Rachel's got her head down the toilet. She's vomiting everywhere. She's shouting at me, going, "Can you grab Zavi? Can you grab the baby?" I grab the baby. Something that's obviously not helping with Rachel being sick down the toilet is Zavi's just had the biggest punami ever. It's exploded out the nappy. It's up his back. I've got him on the change table, and then I'm trying to clean him down, and he's just getting his hands in the poo, and like he's like grabbing his bits, and he's got this thing. As soon as you take his nappy off, like he looks you dead in the eye, he goes all still, and you know he's going to have a wee everywhere. So anyway, yeah, that was our household like this morning.
Comedy video.
I know, right? So, but it's really interesting because it's also so much like that in a weird sort of way kind of encompasses a lot of what we do, which is working with busy, hardworking professionals who have got a full-on career, or they've got their own business, and you know what it's like being an entrepreneur, being a business owner, pulling all of the hours in the day, and they've got a busy home life and family life, and they want to get into the best shape of their life and stay in shape year round. Yeah. And that's basically what we help people do. And I think, so much of what people get taught is the perfect scenario of, you're in your 20s, you maybe got a relationship or not, but you definitely don't have a family. Like the only thing you've got to think about is what you're going to eat and how you're going to train that day. And, it's quite different for a lot of people's clients who are kind of in a similar sort of position to us, where they've got a lot going on. So how we got here. So Rachel and I launched Chase Life in 2015.
Yeah.
And so right now we help people in two primary areas. We help people overcome binge eating, emotional eating, and a disordered relationship with food, as well as covering very important related topics like low self-worth, like a lack of confidence, imposter syndrome, negative body image often goes along with a lot of those things as well. Then we have another program where we help people overcome chronic anxiety as well as depression.
Yeah.
So how I got here, I've always been interested in mindset and psychology and human performance ever since I was a kid. I grew up naturally good at sports, but not a confident kid. And in large part, a lot of my lack of confidence came from the fact that because I was good academically and I was good at sports, and all of a sudden, like all of my self-worth was now attached to always living up to this identity.
Yeah.
I had a massive fear of losing. I had a fear of how I would be perceived if I lost, or the fear of rejection, the fear of humiliation, and so on. And I grew up with kind of a lot of people pleasing behaviours, and so I just got fascinated by how to overcome these things and started working on myself. And I remember probably the first book I ever bought I was probably about 14 at the time, so my first sport was swimming, and it was just a book on sports psychology, and there was a lot of cool things in there, and it just snowballed from there. And then I started looking into hypnosis and hypnotherapy, and then I discovered NLP, and then just kind of went down this rabbit hole. Made some massive transformations in myself, but also then started going on more and more programs and courses, and studied with Richard Bandler, and then Tony Robbins, Phil Parker, Stephen Brooks, and started learning all of these skills in NLP, in hypnotherapy, in life coaching, as well as a few other related areas as well. And one, absolutely loved it. Two, noticed that I was good at it, and I could help people change, and then I started getting, originally it was about my own kind of personal discovery and self-exploration,
fixing yourself first.
And it was it was fixing myself for sure, but it was also about I basically just wanted to be superhuman. I just wanted to have magical powers, basically. And so, how do I tap into that kind of, infinite potential that we all have? Yeah.
And so that's a pretty early age to be, I guess, self-aware and to start that journey. I think I've always been quite introspective. I've always had quite a analytical mind in being able to figure out patterns. I think I've always enjoyed that kind of puzzle. And I've often kind of spent time thinking about why do I feel this way, and so on. And as with all of us, when you're growing up and then you hit your adolescence, you're going through a bunch of stuff, you have no idea what you're doing, how you're getting through the day, why you feel certain ways, and how to change one feeling into another, that's kind of And who was I guess the person you modeled, or the coach that you had, that you sort of I guess shaped the career path? Because I mean, it's not a common one when you're in high school. You say, okay, I'm going to be a coach or a performance coach. Yeah. So, when you go to careers counselor, they're like, do you want to be a lawyer, accountant, all these other things?
My path was not clear whatsoever. So whilst mindset and studying this stuff has always been a common theme, it hasn't always been my career and my profession, and it wasn't obvious from day one. I went so many different routes, and I had no idea. And again, as part of not really knowing who I was, and also growing up as a people pleaser, a lot of the decisions that I made early days were basically to please my parents. Or I had no idea what decision to make, and so I just kind of took their guidance. Yeah. So straight out of school, I did a 4-year apprenticeship as an aircraft fitter, working on helicopters. Okay. Then I went to university, originally to study engineering. Then I changed to European business. Then I graduated. Then I tried to join the army, failed the medical on grounds of both eczema and my eyesight. And I was mega gutted about that. And that was pretty much a year of my life, because I spent a year training, because they only did, the army have this thing called the RCB and then the pre-RCB, and it's only once a year. And so I had to, so that was a year of my life, kind of, expecting to get it. I thought, why would I not get in? And then, and then from there, became a personal trainer. Then I was personal trainer for a few years, and then I started working in practice, helping people overcome issues including chronic anxiety, depression. I also worked with a lot of people with ME, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia.
Yeah. That was in the UK, or?
Yeah. So all of this has been in the UK. Yeah. And then, so did that for a while, and then eventually went all in on what we do now. So originally I used to see people face to face. Now everything that we do is online. We moved to Dubai 2 years ago. So we were originally in London, moved to Dubai 2 years ago. Now we're in Abu Dhabi, just down the road. And here we are.
That's awesome. So I guess part of one of the key areas that I want to talk about today, and as part of one of your programs, is I guess binge eating and emotional eating. And I guess we could interrelate it to other things later. But working as a coach for 17 odd years, you see that there's all these patterns with people in terms of their eating behaviors, and you can change. And we spoke about it before we actually hit record, is where you can tell someone specifically, okay, if you eat 1,500 calories, you eat so many grams of protein, you do this, carb cycling, whatever it is, you'll get to the result that it is. But whenever people, whether they get there or there's some sort of self-sabotage, and a lot of times, or more often than not, it comes back to eating and the emotional patterns that people have with eating. So can you just, I guess, start and touch on the topics with emotional eating?
Right.
Because it's a big area.
It's exactly. It's a massive area. And possibly one of the places to start is what you mentioned about the nutritional guidance that people get given. So there's a number of things that contribute to binge eating. One of them is the internal psychological environment that your nutritional practice, if you like, puts you into. So if I said to you, right, as of midnight tonight, chocolate is erased off the face of the earth, doesn't exist anymore. Like, what are you going to do? You're going to get your fill, right? You're going to go, right, I need to satisfy, like, not just my desire for chocolate right now, but every future desire for chocolate I could ever possibly have. It's when people follow either diets with very rigid rules and very strict rules, like you cannot eat in this certain window, or you cannot eat these certain types of foods. And it's the same kind of internal pressure that you get when people are counting calories or tracking their macros. Now, a lot of people obviously, are very keen on flexible dieting, and they say, no, when you count your calories, you've got all of this flexibility. You can swap one thing for another thing as long as it fits, the same numbers. But it's the belief that you need to go to that level of specificity, that you need to control things to that infinitely small degree, that creates so much internal pressure that inevitably your brain is going to rebel at some point. Inevitably, your brain is going to find some excuse for you to just have a taste of something. And that can be for a number of reasons. Sometimes it's because you're in an environment where you can't control everything 100%. Like, one of the mistaken beliefs that, or one of the approaches that a lot of people take is they say, right, in the past, whenever I've been able to successfully, in quotations, lose weight, it's been because I've been very rigid, very disciplined, very strict on my diet. So obviously what I'm missing out right now is more willpower, is more discipline, is getting things even more precise. So I'm going to leave no stone unturned. I'm going to get everything perfect, everything dialed in. And so that's what they do. But then the moment that they're in any kind of environment where they don't have 100% control, it's like, I don't know how to handle it, kind of thing. And so it breeds an all or nothing mindset. It's either a good day or it's not. And so if it's not a good day, well, I might as well just throw the baby out with the bathwater. And so it might be something like that. Or it might be one of those situations where they notice those kind of urges and cravings coming up, and they're just kind of getting louder and louder and louder. And it feels like the perception that people have when they're experiencing binge eating is the only way that they can get it to shut the hell up is to just give into it. And it, that voice can be, very artful. It's all kinds of directions we can go with this, but basically there's a part of the brain which is hundreds of millions of years older than the part of your brain that you use to consciously think with, your conscious brain. But that part of your brain doesn't operate off logic or intelligence. It operates just off associations, and it's created this association between binge eating and your very survival. And so somebody can get into that place where it's getting louder and louder and louder, and it feels like binge now. If you don't binge now, you're gonna die. And that's kind of the message that part of your brain is it's doing everything that it can to keep the habit alive, because it's got the mistaken bit of code in there, if you like, that binge eating equals survival. And so it can be all artful in all kinds of ways to get you to do that. It can be like very insidious and say, well, you know you're going to binge anyway, so you might as well do it.
Yeah.
Now. Or go on, you deserve a break.
Yeah.
Or it can be super aggressive, like you'll binge now. But it feels like the only way you can get it to shut the hell up is to give into it. Yeah. So there's all kinds of things that, all kinds of environments that people then start looking at the environment. They then start blaming the environment. They then start looking at, it's because of this, it's because of this. But the portion of the brain that we need to tackle is kind of the source of the issue, which is I use the term your survival brain. If I'm sure you've got quite a lot of science nerds, so if you look into the limbic system and the amygdala, it's that part of your brain that these kind of habits are going to be stored within. And but what's going on is that somebody gets to that place where they can't fight the urges, they have to give in, and that kind of internal feeling, that internal pressure is massively exacerbated when somebody's counting calories. Are there people, honestly, I don't know anybody who counts calories all day, every day, as their long-term method for, one, tracking behavior, two, staying in control of their weight loss and their body transformation journey, who also doesn't have massive issues around food, who isn't neurotic or have massive anxiety or fear around food, who isn't a perfectionist with it.
It's not a very good lifestyle if you're going to a restaurant and you're pulling out a set of scales.
Exactly.
And you're putting, is that 150 grams or is that 170 grams? It's
And so one of the things that we say is that when is it that somebody becomes uber obsessed with counting calories? When they need constant reassurance. It's the same reason people are getting on the weighing scales every single day. Is they have this desperation mindset which is based on fear. It's, oh my God, what if I can't get there? Please reassure me that I'm going to. Please reassure me that I'm going to, get my goals and that I am going to get there. I can get there. Like, it's that. And if they don't have things in this super excessively controlled window, they have this massive fear of losing control. And that's one of another thing with counting calories is that the more precisely you believe something has to be controlled, the more fear of control you're going to have.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I guess it's sort of interrelated as well, but that the people that would eat for more like self-soothing, so maybe they're not people that are like, tracking their macros, every specific thing, but they come home at the end of the day, they've had a stressful day in the office, their kid's done something wrong or whatever it is that we spoke about before, and then they'll use a chocolate, wine, whatever it is to self-soothe at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. And so now we're getting into a lot more of what binge eating is really about. Very often when somebody's struggling with binge eating, they think, binge eating, that's about food. Then surely the solution is to do with food. I need to study nutrition more. I need to understand nutrition in more detail. I need to, look at more diets or better diets. So what's the diet that's going to work for me? Ultimately, it's not about food. It's about your emotions. It's about how you regulate your behavior and your emotions. So you're absolutely right, is that ultimately binge eating is a vehicle that you have learnt to use to regulate your emotions. And there's basically two things that you're trying to do. You're either trying to get away from emotions you don't like, or you're trying to move towards emotions you do like. Most of the time, the biggest factor is getting away from emotions you don't like. Feeling stressed, feeling overwhelmed, perhaps struggling with things like self-worth, or feeling angry, feeling out of control in your life. And like you said, it's a way to soothe you, or it's a way to get some kind of release. One of the most common, binge eating actually provides people with benefits, just benefits at the unconscious level. And one of the most common ones is that feeling of just nothingness. It's an opportunity to just zone out, kind of stare and stare. It's like it's got this,
switching off.
It's got a very hypnotic quality to it, like the ritualistic behavior of just eating food mindlessly helps you to just, zone out, space out, switch your brain off and, quote, not think or not feel for a while.
I think I watched one of your videos on Instagram, and you spoke about how if you're like, say, an A-type personality, you're constantly got to be achieving, doing something that it's also filling that void of
100%. Yeah. That's massively connected to it. So many people have learnt to use food for the reasons that we just discussed, but that's going to be compounded and embedded even more if somebody is, the language we use is they're a human doing, which basically means you're no longer a human being, you're a human doing, because now your self-worth is tied to always being busy.
Yeah.
And you always need to feel like you're achieving or overachieving or breaking through, and sitting down and doing, quote, nothing to you is... That means you're being lazy. That means you're being worthless. That means you have no value. That means you're wasting time. And so now you don't give yourself permission to just, switch off.
Yeah.
So at least eating is a doing thing. So now I can keep my human doing status. I'm not wasting time. I'm being busy.
Yeah.
It's keeping me busy, but it's also an excuse for me to switch my brain off and just go, And so your brain, that's a need that your brain absolutely must have, is that ability to switch off. Like your nervous system goes in cycles throughout the day. So I'm sure many of your listeners will know about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. For those who don't, basically the parasympathetic is the rest and digest. That's the modality we go into when we're healing and recovering and soothing and digesting food. And then we've got the sympathetic, which is the part of your nervous system that kicks in when you're mega busy. It's the part responsible for the fight or flight response, but also it's the part that kicks in to do a good workout, or when you're being really busy at work, when you're breaking through. And a lot of people try to force themselves to live in the sympathetic all day long whilst they're awake, and then get all of their parasympathetic needs when they're asleep at night. And the nervous system just doesn't work that way. Like we have cycles throughout the day. And if you ever notice yourself kind of drifting off, daydreaming, procrastinating, can't concentrate anymore, that's basically your parasympathetic nervous system kicking in, wanting to try to do some healing and some repair and some recovery work to, reorganize, do the gardening work, so to speak, in your brain and so on. It's trying to do that work and you're denying it. And so we need to allow ourselves that, regularly throughout the day.
Yeah. And what would be the first steps if you're coaching a client and you identified, okay, they've got some type of emotional eating pattern, whether they're binging or they're using food as self-soothing? How does it work? I guess it comes down to the level of self-awareness. They've got to admit they've got some sort of issue, but how do you tackle it as a coach to start?
Yeah. So,
and it's a hard question. I know
it's super hard to, and first of all, I think I'll just take a moment to explain why.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to answer that question, because what people are so frequently looking for is tips and tricks and hacks.
Yeah.
And my job is to serve people properly, which is to fix the problem. And what actually happens when you give somebody a little tip or trick,
it's putting a Band-Aid on something.
It's worse. It makes it worse. It makes the problem worse. Why is that? Because number one, it's not the complete solution. It can't be the complete solution.
No.
And number two, they don't have the insights, like they're going to have blind spots, or they're going to make mistakes with it. So they're going to go away and they're going to go, oh, cool, this is the secret. I'm going to try it. They go away and try it, and then they fail. Now, do they fail because they can't do it, because they're not good enough, because that's their destiny? No. They're doing it because they don't have the complete solution and they don't have the expertise guiding them. But the damage that then does to their self-belief, and they then,
I can't fix it after that.
Exactly. Well, that didn't work for me either. And so now they're accumulating more and more and more and more evidence of that didn't work, that didn't work, that didn't work, that didn't work. And your brain is like an extraordinary pattern recognition device.
And then I guess then that's when you throw in the towel and say,
exactly,
this is who I am.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that I need to kind of preface with that. That being said, I also want to answer the question as best I can.
But I guess there's also the other thing as well, is if someone's had a bad pattern for 15 years, 20 years of emotional eating, and you read one book and it gives you a tip, and you might go away for a month or 2 months or 6 months or 12 months, but you're going to fall back to that pattern eventually, if you don't have that.
If you don't have the complete solution. I mean, trying to think of an analogy, but it's kind of like trying to fix an injury on your own.
Yeah.
Is it possible? Yeah. But when it comes to something that's affecting your life as severely as binge eating is, and I think that's probably going to be the next thing, that important thing for me to highlight, is that would you rather take that risk?
Yeah.
Would you? And the number of times that we speak to people who have been, who are in their 40s, in their 50s, sometimes even later than that, and they're like, I thought this would have gone away by now. And unfortunately, it never goes away by itself, because it's meeting deep core emotional needs that must be met one way or the other. Yeah. And you've unwittingly, obviously not on purpose, but accidentally, you've conditioned your brain that food is the most rapid, reliable, effective way to meet those needs. And so inevitably, you're gonna hang on to the behavior. But I think honestly, the most important starting point for people is to understand the truth about what it's costing them. Because what's the number one reason why somebody doesn't overcome binge eating? Because they paper over the problem. They paper over it. They pretend to themselves it's going to go away someday, or they remain in kind of hoping modality, and they stay at the superficial level. They keep dabbling with one diet and then another diet, and they don't look at what is this really costing me, because the source behind it that's driving the binge eating is also bleeding into every area of your life. It's affecting your work. Maybe it's affecting your work because you lack confidence, and you're constantly overworked, underappreciated, and you're not getting the promotions that you want, or you're not progressing your career, or you're not progressing your business because you lack confidence. Or maybe you get all of your self-worth from your work and from your business. So now you go the other way. And so now you go all in, and yes, you get a certain sense of pride in your ability to be the fixer of all things and to, achieve all things in your work. But now work is your source of self-worth. And so now you're constantly overworking, and you're that human doing that I mentioned earlier. Yeah. And so now what's your release? Binge eating.
Yeah.
Totally lost my train of thought then.
No. Just in terms of, I guess you were talking about the beginning of assessing where someone, what you do to get them.
Yeah.
So,
that's what I was talking about. So leverage is kind of the starting point, which is understanding what it's costing you. It's costing you so much in your work. It's costing you in your relationships. Has all of the intimacy disappeared from your relationship with your partner? That's a huge point with most of our clients. That they have the intimacy has completely disappeared from their relationship, or it's certainly not what it used to be, or they're struggling to get a relationship in the first place because they don't feel good enough because of this issue. Yeah. The impact that it's having on their body, it's affecting so much, and people paper over it. And when you get yourself to a place where you go, you know what, I cannot go one more day without doing everything to fix this problem.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave no stone unturned, and that doesn't mean finding yet another diet. It means recognizing the truth, which is it's a behavioural and emotional issue, and I'm going to go all in on fixing it with whatever it takes.
Yeah.
That honestly is the most important first step. Is the decision to fix it. Most people don't fix it because they haven't made a proper decision where they're going to go all in. Most people make a decision whereby it doesn't take too. I'll be committed provided it doesn't cost me too much. Well, that's not commitment.
Well, it's the path of least resistance. Is the first one that people would.
Or they have a massive fear of failure. And so they have a fear of what if I can't do it, and what if I'm not good enough? And they would rather keep that fear as a fear than, quote, prove it to be true.
Yeah.
Well, what's the consequence of that? You're absolutely guaranteed for it to be true for the rest of your life.
Yeah. And I guess you in the beginning, you're tugging on, I guess, a raw nerve and trying to make them a little bit more uncomfortable with what it is that it's doing if they don't fix the issue.
Pain is super useful if you know how to use it. Most people, when it comes to pain, they either numb themselves from it and distract themselves from it, or they wallow in it and they go, oh, everything's useless. Like that, neither of those things is using it.
No.
That pain is there to get you to a point to make a decision. And then once you've made that decision where you go, you know what? No more. And you're fully committed. You do whatever it takes, and you don't just say that with words, you actually follow through on that. Then you can get excited about what you're moving towards. Now it's no longer, your focus doesn't have to be on everything that this is costing me and how bad everything is. Now you can get excited about this is the life that I want to create for myself. And that is a super important step.
Yeah.
Like we're all motivated by pain and pleasure, and pain is important because it usually kickstarts the process. We call it push motivation, but push motivation doesn't last.
Yeah.
Because the more progress you make, what happens to the original pain you were in? It diminishes, right? So if you don't have a target that you're moving towards, that you're genuinely excited about moving towards, then you're going to keep yo-yoing. That's one of the reasons why people yo-yo back and forth, is because they have no clarity. They think they know what they want, but when you ask them, they say, well, I don't want my shirt to be so tight. I don't want to feel so self-conscious anymore. It's everything they don't want.
Yeah.
Go on.
And so what happens when, just say you've been working with someone for 6 months and they've had huge breakthroughs, they've worked out self-awareness in terms of what they're doing wrong, but then at that 6 months, 12 months mark, how do you keep them, I guess, rolling on that same and not reverting back to a previous pattern?
Yeah. So really interesting thing with what happens with a lot of our clients is that honestly, overcoming binge eating is fast when it's done right.
Yeah.
It's a matter of weeks, sometimes for some people, a matter of days.
Okay.
That's not typical, but usually within definitely less than 2 months, usually within anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks.
Okay.
Somebody's eliminated it completely.
Yeah.
Sometimes at that point they're like, this is almost too good to be true. But then a few more weeks goes by and it just kind of feels like, this is just normal, right?
Yeah.
It's when it's done right, it should be fast.
Yeah.
But what can then often happen is that as part of perhaps addressing some of the other stuff. So let's say that somebody has struggled with low self-worth and they've been trying to change the way that they look or change something about their body as a way to try to feel good enough. Like they've been walking around with this issue of, I just don't feel good enough, and all that low self-worth and low self-esteem, and changing their body has been a way to fill that void, which it's never, ever, ever going to work. Self-worth is an inside job. It's basically how you communicate with yourself, but people put all of these barriers in the way that prevent them from being able to communicate with themselves in a way where they genuinely love and appreciate and accept who they are today. Now, one of the massive fears that a lot of people have is, well, if I accept who I am today, then I'm never going to lose weight because I'm not going to have the motivation. 100% false. It's a case of I love and accept who I am today, whilst I'm also super excited about what I'm heading towards in the future. It's the same in business. You can be at a place where you're so proud of what you've achieved, and you've got a lovely home, and you're meeting your financial needs, but you've got bigger aspirations. You want to add more value. You want to help more people. You want another level of lifestyle, and so you're motivated to get to the next level. And actually, that's a much more successful way of motivating people, is where they go from good to amazing, as opposed to trying to go from bad to less bad. Or, self-hate to less self-hate. Never works that way. Yeah. So once you address somebody's self-worth on the inside, all of a sudden their original motivation for changing their body, which wasn't working and is never going to work, but that original motivation has disappeared. And so now they're like, why am I doing this again? And so they need to actually get clarity on what they want and why they want it. And that's one of the big reasons why people are not achieving their goals, is that they're trying to change their body because of what they're escaping. They're trying to escape low self-worth, which never, ever works. So actually, it's about what you want more of. What do you want to do more of, feel more of, create more of, experience more of, have more of in your life. If you write it down in that way, what does this give me more of? What does it give me more in terms of emotions, opportunities, my experience of life. And it has to be a daily reward. It has to be something that impacts you every single day, not just once or twice a year when you're in your bikini on the beach.
Yeah, yeah. And then with the rewards, I've found over the years coaching myself is like you'll see someone for initial reason, they'll say, this is my goal and I want to get to, X, whatever the goal is. Do you find that people, when they get to, the place where they've fixed their binge eating habits, that they then will turn to you and say, I've got a completely different goal, and then it uncovers something else? Do you find that a lot yourself with you guys coaching, or do you cut it off from that?
Often the goal will change in the ways that I just described. Often it's their goal was kind of getting away from low self-worth, and now the goal is, whatever it is. It's having extraordinary energy for my kids and then for my grandkids. And actually, something else to add to that as well that I think is really important is that often people are embarrassed or don't want to admit that they want to look good. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as, one, it's in your control and it's a reasonable goal for you. You don't want to, get 6 inches taller. But two, that it's sustainable long term. But and three, very importantly, that it's within a greater package of how you feel important and unique and special and so on. One of the issues, as a side note, that you might see if you start kind of looking around you, is when somebody has been extraordinarily physically attractive from a very early age, and they get significance for it like that and they get significance, they're unique, they're special, they are important, they are revered for something that they've never had to work at. And now that's, that they shouldn't be ashamed of being attractive, but if they rely on that as their only modality for meeting that need, then all of a sudden now that need is, well, it's perishable. You're not always going to be the youngest in the room, the prettiest in the room, the skinniest in the room. And now you're going to go into comparison. Now you've got something, that you're afraid of losing that in large part is out of your control. Eventually, age is going to catch up with you. Yeah. And so we need to make sure that people are setting their goals for the right reasons and for them. Yeah. Goals can change. And it's important that people get clarity on what they want, why they want it, and that it's actually within their control.
Yeah. And so when we're speaking obviously about food, it's self-medication, when you talk about other forms of self-soothing, whether it's alcohol, drugs, sex, whatever it is the approach different, or is it the same overarching principles that when you coach someone?
Honestly, yeah, a lot of the principles are the same. People just what happens is your this part of your survival brain that we were speaking about earlier, it operates off emotions, pattern recognition, and associations. Yeah. And so if you use food as a way of escaping stress and you repeat that pattern over and over and over again, then one, the experience that your survival brain has, so one of the signals that it's going to look out for as a threat to protect you from are your emotions. And so the experience it has is, I'm under threat, I eat some food, threat disappears. Cool. This is a really important survival tool. And the more you repeat it, the more that becomes hardwired as the most rapid, reliable, and effective method that your brain perceives. It's not the most rapid, reliable, effective method, but as far as what your nervous system has encoded, it is. Yeah. Well, other people do exactly the same thing with alcohol, with drugs, with pornography, with shopping, with gambling. Yeah. And so you can the principles of addiction, if you like, are the same across the board. And there are certain things that will cause somebody to be more and more and more entrenched in that issue. One of the biggest ones is suffering. When somebody is in pain is an inevitable part of life, but suffering is when you're in pain but you feel completely powerless to change it. Yeah. And that's when somebody needs, and you can absolutely, transform things and turn things around for that person.
Yeah.
But we've got to look at how they've encoded what things mean, their relationship with the world,
Yeah. So you mentioned just briefly before about comparing yourself to others, and I guess working with someone who's got a type A personality, and whether they're the best looking person in the room or the most successful, they're the richest, they've got the best job. When working with someone like that, I guess it's not related to necessarily food, but how would you get someone to change that and to use that in a healthy way? Because there's, with social media, people, log online and they look at Instagram and they see all these people with these fantastic lives, and then they think, I'm not as good as this other person. And I think it's a very common thread with people now with just the prolific use of social media. What would your advice be, and do you work with people on that area as well?
So one of the things for people to be aware of is where that desire to be unique, special, to stand out in a crowd, where that sits in your hierarchy of priorities, if that makes sense. Like, there's nothing wrong with feeling good about yourself or feeling a sense of pride in something that you've done. But if you must feel important, like the most important, the most special, the most significant, the most unique person in the room, before you then give yourself permission to feel worthy, to feel good enough, to feel like you deserve love, to feel like you have the certainty in your life to control your environment so that you're no longer feel unsafe and feel under threat. If that is step one for you, you basically have a model of the world that is going to create a lot of stress and a lot of misery. Because you're always going to be on offense or defense all the time in every single situation until you've established, and you'll see guys doing this with their wife, for example, right? It's where they always need to feel like important and special and like they're being. They constantly need reassurance that they are the center of the universe before they then, once they feel that emotion, then they're the most loving guy in the world, right? Yeah. But they don't give themselves permission to be that loving person until they feel that way. And it's a lot of insecurity, essentially. Yeah. But this is not like finger pointing because, not everybody, but so many people have done that and felt that in different stages of life and different circumstances. But having that self-awareness that the only reason I'm going to that behavior or that modality is because of that need. Like anger is often, like when somebody keeps going to anger all of the time, often it's that need to feel important, to feel significant that they're trying to meet. Just having that awareness of where that sits in your hierarchy and how that's going to contribute to happiness. Yeah. And actually to have foresight, I think, is really important, because you have to ask yourself, do I actually value happiness? Because not everybody does. Some people actually value feeling comfortable and secure and safe and protected more than happiness.
Yeah. Well, some people trade in their health for career, right? Because they're like, I've got to get to this next promotion, whatever it is, and they'll sacrifice. And I've seen I used to work a lot with successful corporate business guys in DIFC. And, they'd neglect their health for 15, 20 years. And then they'd come and they're like, they've got all the money, but it's like, you can't turn back the clock.
Yeah. And I think it's worth people looking at what their happiness strategy is. And if you actually, if you value happiness and what you believe the route to happiness is, and the most common route to happiness, which never ever works, is the waiting strategy. Like ask yourself this question: how frequently throughout the day are you in the mindset of, I just need to get this shit out of the way? So I just need to get this task done, and then something, then I can enjoy myself.
Yeah.
Then I can relax. Then I can feel like I've done something worthwhile today. I just need to get that. So we wait for this small moment to be out of the way. And it seems insignificant. It doesn't seem that big a deal. But then you do it with the next moment. And then you do it with the next moment. And then you do it with the next moment. And if you're lucky and you have the perfect day, you have this brief window at the end of the day where you give yourself permission to switch off and feel comfortable and feel relaxed and feel like, like now I can enjoy myself. But it's not true joy. It's just relief. Because then what happens? You're thinking about tomorrow. And then you repeat the same process all over again. And so we do it on the micro scale like that. But we also do it on the macro scale in terms of when I get the house, when I make the money, when I have the relationship, when I have the kids, when. Then finally I'll feel like I've arrived. Then finally I'll feel like I'm enough. Then finally I'll feel like I'm a success. Yeah. So most people are in the waiting to be happy strategy. Yeah. And we need to learn to actually bring the happiness now. But one of the things that gets loads of people stuck is that we have two conflicting bits of advice. One is happiness happens now. You need to live for the moment and you need to be present. But then another one is, well, growth and progress is also a critical part of happiness. If you're not growing, then you're shrinking. So you need to set goals and you need to achieve goals. And people get caught between these two things and they think that they're opposite. It's like, live for the now. And then they spend all their money and they, but then they're like, save and invest for the future. And like, they keep going back and forth between these two things. And honestly, I see them as two sides of the same coin. You can absolutely achieve both of them at the same time.
You've got to attach happiness to growth, I guess.
Exactly.
Well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's very much related to what I said earlier about, somebody with their body goals in terms of going from good to amazing. The mindset is that the successful mindset, and this is why you see so many people talking about gratitude, and a lot of people go, gratitude, heard about that, cool, know what that is, done. But they never actually feel it. They never feel grateful. Or they do a gratitude journal, most people don't actually feel the gratitude. They're just writing shit in a book, or they feel it briefly for a moment, and then it doesn't change the rest of the day. It's a mindset. It's a practice that we want to introduce into who you are. We need to make it part of your identity. I am a grateful person, and because the most, if you want to learn how to influence other people, the most powerful guiding, influencing force is the need to be consistent with your sense of identity. Okay. This is one of the things that we address in Chase Life is we need to change somebody's identity. If you see yourself as an overweight person, if you see yourself as a stressed person, long term, all of your choices, decisions, behaviors unconsciously are going to come into alignment with that identity until we change them. So,
and how would you change someone's self-perception if they've got a perception of themselves? I'm fat, I'm lazy, I'm not good, have low self-worth. How do you build someone to get a different identity?
Honestly, it's not that complicated. It's conditioning, and it can happen like that. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but it can happen super fast as well. So first of all, what you have to understand is that your sense of identity is just a belief. That's all it is. It's nothing more than that. It's just a belief about who am I and what is my place in the world. Well, your beliefs can change in a heartbeat, right? How many times have you had the experience of going to bed and you've had a long day and you're faced with a problem and you believe, so your belief is it can't be done, it's insurmountable and it feels too much. You have a good night's sleep, you wake up, you have your morning coffee, and then you're like, of course I've got this, I can handle it. Well, the situation hasn't changed, but your belief about it has. Beliefs can change like that, and often people make this big deal about their beliefs or big deal about their identity. So I've got so much work to do on my identity, I've got so much work to do on my beliefs. No, you don't. It's a choice. And in large part, it is a choice. So there are a few steps for people to go through. And again, the first step with that is getting leverage on yourself. Getting to that place where you go, you know what, that's who I used to be. That's not who I am anymore. I refuse to do that to myself anymore, because your personality is not this genetic or like inbuilt thing. It's learned. So basically what happens is that, first of all, your emotions don't happen to you. You do your emotions. That's one of the things that we teach people. But then if obviously we don't know that when we're growing up and when we're kids and then when we're adolescents. And so we just develop these kind of habitual patterns. But we find ourselves in an emotion. But if we repeat that emotion enough times, eventually it becomes a mood. And then if you repeat that enough times, then eventually it becomes like a temperament. And so now we're starting to build neural pathways to it, and it's starting to become more ingrained. It's starting to become more of a habit. And then eventually, if you repeat it enough times, it becomes part of your personality.
Yeah.
And we very often see our personality and who we are and our sense of identity as this is just who I am. This is just the way I am. Well, no, it's nothing more than a learned behavior. You can change it. If you've got a big enough reason to change it in the first place. And that's where the leverage comes in, is, you know what, this holding on to this belief about myself is costing me so much. I refuse to do that to myself anymore. And then, that honestly, like for a lot of people, that's enough to just make an immediate switch.
Yeah.
And then, there might be some conditioning work to be done in the meantime. And that's some more detailed steps. But
interesting how it's sort of, I guess all this stuff's very interrelated.
Right?
We're talking about binge eating to start, but now we're talking about self-identity, but it's all like you're closing the loop on that one.
Yeah. It's all one and the same, right? It's all just how you meet your needs. The only reason why anybody does anything, whether it's changing their body or making more money or having a relationship, is because they've got emotional needs that they want to meet.
Yeah. And then how do you get someone to act? And I guess this we'll come into later, talking about anxiety and depression, but how do you get to someone to I guess be in the present in terms of stop worrying? I mean, you need to, like you spoke about before, about planning for the future and goals and growth and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But also the other thing is to not be anxious and worry about the future too much, in terms of how do you get someone to actually be and live in the moment, in the present, and enjoy that.
Yeah. So actually, I haven't actually released it yet, but I recorded a video on this yesterday.
Okay. Well, I'll have to link to the video in the show notes. Yeah.
So very often we get caught in either overanalyzing or chronic worry because we're giving all of our time and our attention to thoughts that have no purpose and no outcome. So we do it in two ways. One is with the past, one is with the future. So with the past, let's say that you've just made a mistake. Well, there's a massive difference between dwelling on that mistake and learning from it. When you dwell, what you do is you get to beat yourself up, you get to feel like crap, and you get to spend a lot of time wishing something never happened, which is completely out of your control. With learning, you ask yourself questions like, well, how can I use this as an investment in my future success? It's useful. It's got thinking about what happened now has a useful purpose. It has a useful outcome, and learning is a very empowering state to be in. Now I'm no longer beating myself up. Now I feel good about myself because I'm taking ownership for what happened, and I'm learning from it. I'm no longer just going into blame. Like honestly, whether you're blaming an event, another person, or even blaming yourself, you're still basically just making excuses not to work on yourself. Because now that I'm blaming myself, I'm not good enough anyway. Well, now I don't have to work on myself. Yeah. Well, whereas learning has an objective outcome. And so it's the same with the future. When it comes to the future, there's a massive difference between worrying and problem solving or planning. When you worry, all you do is you just play catastrophic scenarios through your brain and feel more and more and more and more anxiety.
Yeah.
When you're problem solving, again, it has a very, you're setting practical action steps. Yeah. And so both worrying about the future or dwelling over the past, neither of those thoughts have an outcome.
No.
So what happens is, because there's no outcome, there's no end point. So you just get caught in these endless loops. You just stay in it over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Whereas learning, as well as problem solving, both have clear outcomes, which means they have a clear end point. Once you've got to that end point, cool, I can let it go, move forwards with my day. So if you're stuck and you're struggling with a lot of overanalyzing, overthinking, chronic worry, then ask yourself two questions. One is, does this thought that's just popped into my mind have any use or purpose? Is there any benefit to giving it my attention in the first place? If no, great, let it go. If yes, then go to question two, which is now the best time to be doing that? because you may have made a mistake at work, and it may well be useful for you to learn, okay, where's the bottleneck? Like where did the problem occur? And like, because maybe it's not clear, right? Maybe it's a complicated system or process and you need to figure it out. But maybe you're in the middle of another task at work, and now because you're dwelling or you're trying to problem solve, you're no longer in the moment. So now you're going to make even more mistakes than what you're doing right now. So maybe it's actually much better and more useful for you to address it later. So those two questions, is there any benefit to it in the first place? Every thought that pops into your head, like you don't, and all of the over-analyzers listening are going to go, oh my God, I need to listen and look out for every single thought that pops into my head. But no, like just use your emotions as an early warning signal. But if you find yourself in like feeling that emotion of stress or overwhelm that's as a result of overthinking, of over-analyzing, then just notice which thoughts you're paying attention to. Some of those thoughts, you can just like let them, like your brain is an organ like any other, just like your pancreas pumps out digestive enzymes and your stomach pumps out hydrochloric acid. Your brain pumps out thoughts. And some of them are going to be useful and some of them are going to be utter crap. Like you don't have to pay attention to all of them.
Yeah. And I think I've seen one of your videos, or maybe I read it somewhere, is about your brain's, primal instinct is survival. It doesn't care whether you're happy or unhappy. It's like, it's just trying to push you through and keep you in that survival mode.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Evolutionarily, your brain is not designed to make you happy. It's designed to make you survive. Now,
conditionally, obviously, you can change.
Yeah. Now that being said, like for a lot of people, they hear that and it sounds like happiness is super elusive, and it's really not. Because actually, one of the key things that we actually teach people is how to detach their internal state of being from the outside world. Because most people are trying to fix everything in the outside before they then give themselves permission to feel good on the inside. And, they try to address the problems, they try to fix their life circumstances, they hope that the people in their lives are going to change and behave differently before they then give themselves permission to go, finally, everything's in its place, now I can feel good. But honestly, until the day you die, there will always be problems. There will always be unchecked boxes on your to-do list. There will always be unfinished business. There will always be unanswered questions. There's always going to be something. So if you're waiting for the day when everything is perfectly in its box before you can feel good, then you're never going to get there.
Yeah.
So, we need to detach what's happening in the outside world from what's happening in our internal world, and go to our internal state of being first. Because when you show up that way, it's just like I mentioned earlier about your happiness strategy. Are you waiting to feel good, or are you bringing the happiness now? What is the most beneficial state for you to be in right now, this moment? And that doesn't mean that you're going to be in a state of ecstasy with everything that you're doing, like filling in your tax return and going, "Woo, this is amazing!" But at least you can be in if you asked yourself the question, if I had to, if I was forced to, if my life depended on it, if my children's lives depended on it, could I bring an enjoyable state to this? How could I do that? Could I put some music on? Could I just take my time and just feel calm and relaxed? Could I remind myself of, things that I enjoy whilst I'm doing like this mundane task? Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast yesterday with Paul Check, and he was talking about the polarity of good versus evil. And it's kind of, he used the analogy of like, to be happy, you need to obviously understand the opposite side of that as well. And it's not that everyone needs to be depressed, but to be, happy and to enjoy yourself, you need to have some sort of contrast. With that.
I 100% agree. You do need contrast, and I think
because your head will be in the clouds if you're just like constantly you think that everything's good, it's good the whole time. Obviously, you want your default setting to be, grateful, happy, for most of the time, but there needs to be, some sort of contrast. And like you spoke about with problems, it's going to give you that contrast.
Yeah, for sure. Well, one of the ways that you feel gratitude is through contrast. It's not the only way, but for sure is to look at something that you have and not just intellectualize and say, oh yeah, like other people have it worse than me, like, and you don't actually feel it, like you actually like. That's why, like, some of the stories. Two examples that I use a lot are Katie Piper. For those who don't know who she is, she's the girl who, beautiful girl, ex-model, who then was subject to an acid attack. Lost the sight in her left eye. Like really bad burns, like massively disfigured, and like she's just an unbelievable human being. Like, she's so inspirational. But you look at, like, when was the last time you felt grateful for your skin?
No.
And another example is Nick Vujicic, who's some of you may have seen some of his videos online. He's the guy with no arms, and he was born with no arms and no legs. Obviously went through like some horrendous struggles when he was a kid. You know, I'm useless, like I'm gonna have no purpose, like nobody's ever gonna fall in love with me, I'm never gonna have like. And now, like, the guy's incredible. He travels the world, like he even taught himself how to swim. It's like, you want to see the video of him swimming, like no arms, no legs, swimming. It's like you wouldn't believe it. He's got beautiful wife and 3 kids, I think, maybe. Like, the guy's just got an extraordinary life, and he's genuinely happy and fulfilled. But when was the last time you felt grateful for the fact that you actually have arms and legs, that you can wipe your own ass?
It's only times when you see videos like that you think, you know, I should be grateful, because
for sure. And so just spending a moment to actually focus on things that you are grateful for, but why you're grateful for them and what it would mean if they were taken away from you is for sure a useful way of feeling gratitude.
And can we just, I've looked on your website and you've got like a whole heap of testimonial videos, but just for an example, do you have like a case study you could talk about where you had someone, obviously keep their identity anonymous, but from point A to point B, what would someone expect working with you guys? And you can talk about whether it's a case study.
So one of the ones that I'll mention, I can actually dive into the details, because this guy has been unbelievable. Like, he's been completely open and expressive in what he went through, and he talks about it on the videos as well. So if you choose to go on there and look at Nick's story about overcoming depression. So Nick was sexually abused when he was a kid by a scoutmaster, and he suffered with horrendous depression. He said he basically hated every day. He couldn't get out of bed. He said he had, you know, an amazing wife, amazing friends, you know, beautiful children, but he said his life sucked. He absolutely hated every day, and he would just have massive emotional swings. He would have that fog that would descend where, you know, everything was numbed, you know, smells, tastes. And I worked with him, and literally after day one, he made a massive 180, and within days he was rocking, no more depression, and continued to apply what I taught him for a few weeks, and then, like, very quickly didn't need to use it anymore whatsoever. And it's now 3 years, and he's been good ever since. He did have one moment when 6 months later, and I use this example a lot to guide people on stuff that can happen. He was walking down the street, and he walked past somebody who had exactly the same aftershave that his old scoutmaster did, and he had this massive flashback. And because he hadn't needed to use anything that I taught him since he first came to work with me. He'd forgotten how to use it, so we jumped on a phone call. Within that one conversation, turned it around. For the next 24, perhaps 48 hours, needed to use it a few more times. Ever since then, no more relapses, been good ever since. And I use that as an example of sometimes we have stimuli in our external world. It could be a smell, or it could be a song, or like some kind of event. It could be people arguing.
Linked to his emotion.
Exactly.
And what he was going through.
Exactly. And when it happens, sometimes people are like, oh my God, I've taken a massive backward step. I've undone everything that I've ever worked for. That's not what's going on. It's just a new thing, a new environment that we just need to apply exactly what we did on day one to this situation. It's kind of like if you learn to ride a bike and you can cycle no-handed and like you're excellent at cycling now, but then one day you hit ice or you hit gravel for the very first time and it feels like you've forgotten how to ride.
Yeah.
Does that mean that everything that you've learned to that point has been erased? No, it's just a new environment that you haven't applied these skills and these techniques to. And that's exactly what was going on with him. So that's one of the stories. I think one of the other examples would be, there's so many binge eating ones that I could mention. One of them would be Erin. Who's one of our clients in the States. Amazing lady. She's got a super brain on her. And she's a specialist in medical devices. Cochlear implants, I think, is what she does, what she works in. But she had some upsetting events from her past. But she was a massive binge eater. She had tried, and this is one of the things that we often use as an example for the solution isn't a lot of therapeutic approaches where people are diving into the past and revisiting what happened in the past and where did this come from, or analysing the problem. Why do I binge? Where does this problem come from? Erin had been through all of that. She'd been through therapy and counselling. And in the video, she says, I would leave my counselling sessions, go straight to the store and buy a bunch of food to binge on. And she said, I knew why. I knew why I was struggling, but I didn't have the practical action steps for fixing it and for overcoming it. Yeah. And so we often use Erin's example as highlighting the fact that the solution is training. Just like you have fitness training for your body, this is like fitness training for your mind. There's basically a gap in your skill set. It's nothing more complicated than that. When people get branded with disorders or conditions with a label, they get labeled with something. Now it feels like this, that their identity, they become that. Exactly. It becomes part of their identity, and it feels like a disease, and now I need somebody else to fix me, or I need surgery to remove this thing from my brain, or it's not, it's just a skill set. Right? Low self-worth is a skill, confidence is a skill. Like if you want to eliminate low self-worth, then we need to teach you the gap, the skill that's missing from your skill set. It's exactly the same with binge eating. There's a gap in your skill set. You're meeting certain emotions one way, and we need to teach you and train you how to meet them in a whole new way, and that takes training. Yeah, that's interesting. It's good. It's a good analogy as well. With coaching, in particular, strength coaches and personal trainers, I find a lot of coaches, not every trainer, but I mean the good ones know when to refer out when it's gone out of their scope of practice. And I think a lot of coaches will get, people, and they'll have some sort of binge eating issue, or they'll have some psychological issue that isn't in their realm and it isn't part of their scope of practice and their area that, they might have read a couple of books on, like Tony Robbins, might have attended a few seminars, and they think that they can fix someone. But what's your advice for a coach? And if you get someone and you don't know in terms of what steps should someone, or how do you identify the issues whether it's a binge eating thing, so then they know, okay, this is out of my scope of practice, rather than just saying, follow my fitness pal and put in all your stuff through here. And I think that's probably the biggest area of mistake. That's a great question. And, because mindset is becoming more and more popular now, and we see so many more people promoting that they work in mindset. And the advice that I would say to people is treat it just like physiotherapy or chiropractic or osteopathy. If you're a trainer and you've got a client who's got an injury, can you help correct certain things that mean that injury goes away if you have a great understanding of human anatomy and being able to identify imbalances in the body. Yeah. And if you know, always do what you believe in your heart of hearts is the best thing for that client. And if you think, you know what, I know why this is happening, I know how to fix it, I know that I'm going to be safe, I know that I'm not going to injure them further, cool, do that. And you know, so some of the best trainers out there are, you know, people who have that ability. But there's always going to be a limit. There's always going to be a threshold. And if you want to, you know, if you think that you're going to, you know, be the person who's going to be the best personal trainer in the world and the best person at fixing injuries and the best person at helping people overcome, you know, their emotional issues, then, you know, you're just spreading yourself very thin. Like, what are the chances that you're going to be, you know, a world-leading physiotherapist, osteo, chiropractor, and a world-leading, you know, specialist in emotional behavioural change and a world-leading personal trainer all at the same time?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, is it possible? I don't know. It's, you know, it's a pretty ambitious goal, right? And so yeah, just know where the limits are for you personally, and so, you know, and that's going to depend on your personal skill set. So using the injury analogy, if you're a new trainer and you're just starting out and you're, you know, deeply passionate and you're educating yourself and stuff, but as soon as somebody gets an injury, the chances are probably the best place to start is find yourself a physical therapist. I'm a big fan of all of the big three, like physios, osteos, chiros.
Yeah.
And work closely with that person. And it's exactly the same with emotional issues. Like if you've learned some tools and some skills and some techniques that you, again, asking yourself that question, what is the most beneficial thing for this client? Is the most beneficial thing me working on them and addressing it in this session? Is there something that I can give them or do with them that's immediately going to move the needle and immediately make an improvement? Great, do that. But if not, refer out. Yeah. And it's going to be different for everybody based on your skill set and where you're at. But just honestly, just be honest with yourself.
Yeah. And I think also, even if it isn't in your wheelhouse, people often become a little bit proud and they're like, you know, trying to fix something they're not good at. But I think it builds a level of trust and empathy with the client if you're the person to say, look, you know, this shoulder injury I can't fix, but this guy is the guy for you, and you refer out, and then the client will come back and they'll stay with you because they trust you now. 100%.
One of the physios that I respect the most that I had when I you know, had some shoulder injuries was somebody who said, I don't know. Like it's one of the most trust building things is to say, I don't know, but here's what we're going to do about it, as opposed to trying to bullshit your way through it.
Yeah.
Because people can sense when you're trying to bullshit your way through it. And even if they can't, they're obviously not going to get the result at the end of it. And then they're going to lose faith and they're going to lose trust.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you know, when it comes to mindset work, the analogy I use is when somebody's advertising mindset work, and that, actually, before I tell that, then we've had quite a few fitness professionals approach us asking to help them with their binge eating, who admit that they've been struggling with it for years. They feel like a massive imposter, like that this has been going on behind the scenes. Like it's honestly, it's one of the biggest dirty little secrets of the fitness industry, the number of trainers who are struggling with it.
It doesn't surprise me at all.
I know, right? Yeah. Now, you know, that's not their fault. Like, everybody's got their thing. And you know, if you want to overcome it, then we're here to help. But then we go and look into them, and they are advertising services to help people overcome binge eating. It's like, where's the integrity? You know?
No. And that's the thing. You got to be authentic for people to identify with you, and you as a coach. You know, you've got to have that level of trust, because if you don't have trust with that coach, then they're not going to listen to what you're going to say, and it's not going to, the message you're conveying is not authentic as well. So what would your suggestions be for, say, a coach, and they steps that they could do to improve, whether it's courses, seminars, working with yourself, or reading books, or what would you recommend would be the next steps for someone?
I guess it depends where your area of interest and focus is. For a lot of people, it's working on yourself first. And I think that's super important. Just like you wouldn't hire a personal trainer who is unhealthy and doesn't live, breathe and talk what you want to achieve. You wouldn't go to a financial advisor who's broken, in massive debt and can't get themselves out of financial trouble.
True.
So if work on yourself and make sure that you're practicing what you preach. That doesn't mean you have to be perfect. Everybody's got their stuff. Everybody's always got their next level of personal growth.
Yeah.
But make sure that you are consistently making progress and that you're improving and evolving as a person, and that you address stuff that you need to address.
Yeah.
And then where to go? Yeah, it does depend on which direction to take.
But I guess from my perspective as well, probably the biggest one especially if you're working as a transformation, fat loss, that sort of stuff. I think the emotional eating thing is always present. Not, to some people it's a big issue. For other people it's not. But I think that's probably one of the biggest areas I think coaches need to work on.
Yeah.
And whether it's identifying that and then referring out, or whether they work on their own skill set for that.
Yeah. So places to start specifically for that. Massive selfless plug, buy my book. Think Straight, Lose Weight. It's available on Amazon. But then, if you want to take things further and study courses, people who are interested in NLP, why not train with a guy who actually invented it in the first place? Of whom there's two people, Richard Bandler and John Grinder. I'm not sure if John Grinder's actually teaching, but Bandler is. Bandler still teaches NLP, so why would you not go and learn from him? So if you're interested in studying that further, go with him. And yeah, that's probably a good place to start. But anybody that you feel inspired by, some of the people that I've trained with, Stephen Brooks, Phil Parker, Tony Robbins, look them up, and if you feel like investing at that level, because training at that level is a big commitment. So you've got to be ready to invest in actually becoming the best that you can be. I'm also in the pipeline going to be releasing some emotional and educational some emotional and behavioural change education. What that looks like yet, not sure. It might be a brief course, 6 weeks, 12 weeks. It might be a year-long program, but it's definitely something that I've been thinking about doing for quite a long time now, because we do have a lot of trainers who do reach out to us asking for, how do I learn to get these behavioural changes out of my clients? And what we teach is what we do with our clients is specifically for the client. The analogy that I was going to use earlier was if you're a client and you go to a personal trainer and you get a body transformation, then at the end of that process, how to do that for yourself. But on its own, that's not going to be enough for you to do it for somebody else. So there needs to be a more comprehensive kind of training behind it. And so, yeah, that's something that I'm definitely looking at releasing. So definitely follow our stuff. And if you're interested and you want to be kept in the loop with that, then send me a message, and I can let you know what I'll be releasing and when on that. But in the meantime, the thing is, it's such a massive area that there are so many. Most of the stuff out there, certainly everything that I've trained in, is geared specifically towards therapists and coaches who are going to specialize in this area. And so as a result, it's a big full-on program specifically designed to turn somebody into it's kind of like I guess PT, like you can become a PT and like in a 3-hour weekend course, but a decent PT certification is going to take you a year. There's going to be I mean, it's like anything. It's like the more you learn, the more you need to learn, and you realize
it's such a complex beast as well.
Yeah.
So now obviously you're you embody what you do in terms of your lifestyle. You spoke about it before. You've got a family, you've got a wife, and you've got a business. And how do you keep yourself in check? And I guess, what are your habits, routines on a daily basis? It's more specific just about yourself.
Yeah, right. So I tend to get up anywhere between 6 and 7.
Yeah.
And actually, interestingly, I think there's a lot of people out there who promote get up at 4:30 a.m. and if you don't do that, then you're being lazy. Honestly, it's whatever works for you. I tend to get up slightly later, between 6 and 7 is pretty late by a lot of people's standards. But I go to bed later. But the key is that I don't finish work at the normal time that other people do. I work later too. Some people get up late and then they finish work early, and they basically have a 2-hour window where they're actually productive. So I tend to kind of backload my day a bit more. So I get up a little bit later, between 6 and 7. I go to bed a bit later, and that actually works perfectly with Rachel, because Rachel is a mega early bird.
Early, yeah.
So Rachel will get up, sort the baby out first thing in the morning. So I'll be up between 6 and 7. I will have my morning coffee, then I will go into my morning ritual, my morning routine, and I actually rotate mine a lot. A lot of people will teach different morning rituals and morning routines, whether it's meditation based or breathing based or whatever, and I actually rotate mine. Sometimes I'll do a 10-minute meditation, then I'll go into some gratitude stuff, then I'll go into some planning stuff for the day and some mental rehearsal and some imagery stuff. Other times I'll do a breathing practice, and I'll incorporate some of that stuff into the breathing practice itself. I basically just mix and match. I think what matters is actually having a ritual that sets you up for the day. Most people, when it comes to your internal emotional states, your state is going to be very connected to and triggered by your environment. So whatever emotional state you find yourself in a lot of the time, whether it's frustration or overwhelm or anxiety, then if you're consistently getting into those states in the same places all the time, then it can get to a point where that environment then triggers that state. And most people do the same thing every day. They go to the same coffee shop, they get in the same car, they take the same journey to work, they see the same people at work, they do the same activities at work, they go to the same places, and so on and so on and so on, and they're on autopilot the whole time. So I think having a practice where you set things up at the start of the day to get yourself into the optimal state of mind, that I think is super important. Is that part of the secret to overcoming things like chronic anxiety? No. But it's a great place to start, right? So I'll do that, and then I will typically, after I've done my morning ritual, the first thing I'll usually do is whatever my daily message is, whether it's a video or writing an article or a blog. Then I will get into coaching my clients. Most of my time during the day is coaching. So it's making sure that everybody's on track, everybody's getting the breakthroughs, the distinctions that they need, doing the coaching calls that I do with my clients. Most of those are done by a video conference. If not, it'll be on the phone. And then I'll have a window in which I will speak to prospective clients who are applying to work with us. We actually work by application only, because we need to make sure that somebody's actually going to be ready and committed to do the work. We don't offer people a place to work with us. We don't invite them into the program unless we're 100% confident that it's the right fit. That it's the right fit, but that they're also going to get results. And they need to be showing up, making it a priority and demonstrating that to us. So anyway, I have a small window where I speak to people on that. I'll go to the gym usually early afternoon. So we're very lucky where we live here. We've got a residence gym which is literally the next street over there.
Okay.
Which is amazing.
It's what you need.
It's adequate.
Yeah.
You know, I'm having to make do with like a Smith machine and some cables and some machine weights and stuff. It doesn't have what I ideally would like, but the convenience of that over,
traveling.
Basically, it would be at least an extra hour out of my day to go to the nearest decent gym.
Yeah.
So like that's a godsend. It's amazing. So I'll usually do that between 12 and 2. Then later in the day, I tend to structure most of my tasks that don't require so much brain power.
Yeah.
More kind of admin-y based stuff, that type of thing, in the second half of the day. And then evening time is always family time. So I will always have some involvement in Xavi's dinner. Rachel's, sometimes I'll do it, but most of the time Rachel's feeding him. He's like a little hurricane. It's like the mess. If you follow Rachel on Instagram, you'll know what I'm talking about. Literally just coated from head to toe every time he eats. So I'll usually have some involvement with that. I will usually try and eat at the same time as he is. Like I'm a big fan of family meal times.
Yeah.
And then I will always do his bath. So then it's bath time with me. Then I will. Then I'll read him a book. We'll have a little bit of playtime downstairs, and then Rachel,
he goes to bed.
Rachel put him to bed. Yeah, and then evening time, I will usually spend at least an hour studying or learning something related to my profession and what I'm passionate about. And it might be a course that I'm enrolled in and studying, or it might be a book I'm reading, or whatever that looks like. But I'll usually have at least an hour where I'll do that.
Yeah.
And depending on the day, if I've got time, I might watch a bit of TV before bed, or I'll just turn in, or I'll just have. I like to make sure that I've got at least half an hour of basically just
you
brain
time.
Just kind of brain off, like whether it's some mind-numbing TV or some gratuitous kind of action kind of movie or something, but something where I just don't have to think too much,
So what's next for you and Rachel and Chase Life and future plans? What are you sort of planning for you guys?
So what's next? So we want to scale what we do. We want to scale what we do with our binge eating program and our anxiety program to the point where we're bringing on coaches to work for us, with us, and deliver that program. And also wants to, what I was mentioning earlier about some kind of educational program and on behavioural and emotional and behavioural change, because I think it's an area where honestly there's so few things out there that either work or work rapidly and powerfully. And the number of times that we have clients coming to us who they feel like they've tried everything and their hope is just being like battered through the floor because of all of these different things that they've tried and nothing's really worked for them. So we want to start also kind of bringing what we do, but we want to do it in a way. Certainly right now, I don't have an interest in training therapists. It would be more people like trainers or relationship coaches or finance and budgeting coaches who are trying to get their clients to be consistent, to follow the principles, and their clients are constantly sabotaging themselves. So it'd be something geared towards people like that who as simple as succinct, practical action steps to help them start bringing some change to their clients.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Cool. So we're getting to the end of the interview. I've got a couple of rapid fire questions that I usually ask the guests. It's just to get to know you a little bit better. You can take as long as you want, or it can just be one word answers. But I think you might have mentioned it before, but what's your all-time favorite book, whether it can be self-help training book or something that's pivotal in your life that sort of shaped, I guess, who you are and pointed you in a direction? Doesn't necessarily have to be the best book, but something that's had an impact on you.
There's two back to back. So when I was when I was a teenager growing up, I had a big fear of confrontation. and I was looking for, help in all kinds of directions. I, went and studied martial arts and, did jiu-jitsu and boxing and kickboxing and judo and a whole bunch of stuff. And I still had this kind of, lack of confidence. And so I found this book. This was pre-internet.
Yeah.
Giving away how old I am now. I'm going to be 41 on Sunday.
Oh wow! Happy birthday for Sunday.
Thanks, bud. So yeah, giving away my age. But this was pre-internet, and I found a book by a guy called Jeff Thompson, and I'm gutted that he's not on social media because he's an amazing guy. And the book was titled Fear. So I read that book, and then I read the second book that he did, which is called Watch My Back. And Jeff was a doorman who worked in Coventry, which was at the time the most violent city in the UK. He worked on the door for 10 years and and so basically Watch My Back is all of his, it's purely from an entertainment perspective, it's amazing. Like it's all of his stories from the door and like the stuff they got up to. But also just that whole concept of fear and how you address fear and how you overcome fear and face it and so on. And that for me, that was probably the first personal development type book that and then when I went to university, I then went and actually trained with Jeff. He was in Coventry, so I was at Loughborough and Coventry was just down the road. So I used to go and train with him once a week, and he was so much more than just like a martial artist. Like he was is a real kind of philosopher, and he really got me super interested in a lot of this work really, and that certainly my modern day skill set didn't come from that, but that was a big fork in the road for me. Was he was one of the first people that helped me to understand, it's not me, like it's these things that I struggle with, that it's normal. And actually it's how you use it as opposed to making it part of your identity and your self-worth. He was the first person that kind of triggered that for me. That's awesome. Yeah, he's an amazing dude. Look him up, Jeff Thompson.
I'll definitely have to get that one. I haven't read that, so
yeah,
be a good one to get. Next one, easy one. Favorite movie or something that's
Born Identity.
Yeah.
I'll say Born Identity.
Yeah.
Anything else I'd add to that? Yeah, I'll stick with that one.
And do you have any quotes that you'd live your life by, or you say on a daily basis, or you say to your coaching clients? Is there anything, catchphrases that you use?
Yeah, loads. The one that immediately popped into my head, maybe it's because we were still on the subject of martial arts, was a Bruce Lee quote, which was, "Don't wish for an easy life, but wish for the courage to endure a hard one."
Yeah, that's a good one.
Pretty cool quote.
It's a very good one. So final question, if you could turn back the clock and give yourself advice when, whether it was when you're 15 or, 5 years, 10 years ago, is there any advice that you'd give yourself or no?
Do things for you. So I think a big turning point for me was what I mentioned. I touched on it earlier about making so many decisions based on my parents' values and desperately wanting to please them.
Yeah,
I think a lot of inevitably as we're growing up, our behavior is shaped by our parents and our teachers, and at first we're not doing our homework or studying in class because we find it fun or rewarding. I mean, I'm sure that's a part of it, and if there are certain subjects that you're naturally good at, you're probably going to enjoy that. But for the most part, our motivation, for a lot of us anyway, is because of the praise that we get when we do it and the punishment when we don't do it.
Yeah.
So then a lot of my decisions, I didn't follow what I absolutely loved and what I was passionate about. I was very much schooled in the belief system of the only things worth studying are the academic stuff, the sciences, that kind of stuff, and you have to get a safe, secure job, and you have to be employed and start paying into your pension straight away, and basically that like maximum security prison. That's obviously not that there's anything wrong with that, because my brother went that route and he is one of the happiest people I know. He's My brother's an economist. He works for Ofcom. Great career, super happy family. My brother is one of the most evolved, emotionally stable people I know, who has never studied any of this stuff. He's just
just got it.
Yeah, he's just figured it out on his own. But he has gone that route. But that wasn't the route for me. And it wasn't until I was what I mentioned earlier about when I was at university. When I originally wanted to change course, I sent this really long email to my parents, explaining why I was doing what I was doing, and I know you love me, and I know this might come as a shock to you for me, changing this and stuff, and it was a big deal for me. And then after that, I had a span of about 10 years of just kind of doing one thing and then doing another thing, and there was always that common theme of mindset, and I always studied that in the background, and I was always doing that, and then eventually that just took over and became, and eventually I discovered my passion. But when people talk about discovering your passion, a lot of people worry about, I need to know what that is and what my purpose in life is, and it's almost like they feel like their purpose should be innate and they should know what it is. And a lot of the time it's a discovery process. You go down one road, and I think one of the fastest ways to discovering your purpose is whatever you do, go all in. Do it to the best of your ability, because even if it turns out to be not the right path for you, at least one, you've got a sense of pride in having done a great job, and two, you've got so much more clarity on what you really like, what you don't like. You get more clarity on your values. But I think doing things for you, identifying what your values are and living by your values as quickly and early as possible, I think would be one of the, it's a tricky area, right? Because on the then
you learn from your mistakes as well. So
because at the same time, if you've got kids growing up and your kid wants to be, I don't know, world champion crochet or something, and you're like, well, there's no security. You're going to worry for your kids, and So it's obviously it is a balancing act to be struck. You've got to be intelligent with stuff, but fundamentally, there's always going to be a threshold for some people, for everybody. But I think if you're going down a route and that that the only reason you're doing this is to get approval from somebody else, it's probably not the right decision.
Yeah, well, that's a good answer.
Long.
I like that. So finally, where can people get in contact with you and find out what you're doing next?
Yeah, so our website is chaselifeconsulting.com. We also have, Chase Life Consulting is kind of our primary website. Currently, it needs updating because we've got Chase Life Breakthrough, which is the anxiety and depression. So you can go to chaselifebreakthrough.com, and then our program for binge eating is Chase Life Intensive. But if you just go to Chase Life Consulting, that's kind of our primary website. Our emails are run through that, so you can contact us through there. Chaselifeconsulting.com is the main website. On social media, my Facebook is david.godfrey.page. Both Instagram and YouTube are DX Godfrey. My middle name's Xavier, which is also the name of our firstborn son. Yes. Slightly self-indulgent, although it's also a nod to mum, because some of mum's French, and mum really wanted to call me Xavier. It was at a time when kind of, in the UK, nobody had ever heard of it. And they were like, everybody was like, what? His name's what? So they decided to call me David. So, it's a nod to that as well. So he's got a French name, and also his middle name's Welsh because Rachel's Welsh. Okay. His middle name's Reese.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. So any parting words for the listeners or anything?
Nothing that comes to mind. I guess... a lot of your, why are people listening to your podcast? Because they want to become better in some area. They want to become better either for themselves as in their own training, in their own self-development, in their own personal development, or they want to become better because of what they can deliver for their clients. And yeah, I guess maybe the final parting word is what I mentioned earlier about discovering your purpose, which is you may not know exactly what that looks like yet. Maybe you're, in the beginning or the middle of your career and you're not quite sure which way you want to go. But whatever it is, go all in. Just do whatever you're doing right now and be the best at it. Don't just tick a box. Don't just go through the motions. Like, go all in and be the absolute best that you can be. And if it turns out after 6 months, 18 months, however long, that actually that's not your passion anymore, then great. Now you've got some clarity and you can go in another direction. Yeah. But I think maybe the final message is being bold and decisive. Actually, you know what? That's probably the best parting message, because that honestly is also the solution to fixing binge eating. It's the solution to fixing anxiety. Working with us is a commitment, but that's the same in anything any major life achievement, personal breakthrough, personal transformation, whatever it is that you want. More money, better relationship, better body, better health, better mindset, or if you just want to be happy, achieving that requires making bold decisions. You can't dabble. You can't play it safe.
Can't do the same thing that you were doing before and expecting a different answer or result.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. Exactly. And so you're going to have to make some decisions that are scary. Every time that we have invested in a business coach, when we moved over to the UAE from London, like all of these types of decisions have been scary. And most people don't make those decisions. And actually, one of the best pieces of advice for people is to understand that making the wrong decision is better than making no decision. Because if you make no decision, two things happen. One, you remain stuck in a situation that makes you unhappy, and that starts to fester and starts to amplify. And two, you train your brain to procrastinate. It becomes a habit that you tolerate from yourself. Yeah. You're better off making fast decisions and making the wrong decisions, because that's how you learn. Right? It's that old, I'm sure it's such a cliched thing, but success is dependent on good judgment. Good judgment is dependent on experience. Experience is dependent on bad judgment. So the faster you make bad judgment, the more mistakes you make, the faster you learn, the more it's such a cliche, but it's super true. Be bold, be decisive, make decisions about this is the life I want to live. This is what I refuse to tolerate anymore, and go out and chase life.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time today, David. It's been awesome. I'm sure the listeners have got a lot out. So thanks again.
Thank you for having me. Massive pleasure.